Broadcasts of the City of Neenah Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents via the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues or about these broadcasts by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or by completing the electronic feedback form on the city website, www.neenahgov.org. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.
Under the circumstances, Mayor, I think we could allow for a brief comment, yes.
Okay, well, normally we always have it available to the public. So, and I see a couple of the public on here. So at this point, I'm going to ask if the public has any comments regarding tonight's business. They're free to share them with us now. Just state your name and address, please.
Sure, I suppose I can start. John Haran, my address is 329 Park Drive in Neenah. My business is at 133 West Wisconsin Avenue. And I was actually informed about this meeting by Maureen Wallenfang. She called me for a quote about, restaurants and reopening this week and everything. And she told me about the meeting, so I figured it would be a nice thing to sit in on if I'm able to. Normally, these meetings take place when I'm at the stoves. So during, this period, I figured I would, check in. I'm excited about the prospects, and I think it's a good idea, but I'm sure there's, more than one or two details that need to be ironed out. So I'm just interested to see how it goes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anything else? Anyone else from the public like to state anything at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to the ordinance and just let me set the table. This was something that I brought up, I believe, not this past Friday, the Friday before, after talking with a few restaurant owners and a few bar owners in the city. And because of COVID-19, the necessity to, in my opinion, to spread people out. If bars, restaurants are going to limit their capacity, this is a great opportunity in my mind to utilize the outdoors on very nice nights. So I had sent something to the council for their review and to just get their thoughts or suggestions if anyone would like us to pursue this. A good number of the council members got back to me, and at that point I said I would bring it up at the last council meeting. So during that council meeting, it was just brought up as an item for possible discussion. Staff was then directed to look at some of the other ordinances. Specifically, Oshkosh had just passed one the night before we had passed, had talked about it. So staff Director Hayes informed us all that we have the framework for this anyways. So we would like to, because time is of the essence, I believe, with the bars and restaurants opening up. But this, the bottom line in my mind is to utilize a lot of nice summer nights, get people out of the inside where there's a crowd and get them adequately spaced, social distance, and do it properly and under some guidelines to ensure that it's just not done willy-nilly, that someone like the Department of Community Development still has some ability to enforce the rules that are currently in place for outdoor beer gardens, outdoor cafe licenses, and those types of things. So with that, I think I'm going to ask, is it okay if I ask Director Hayes to give us a little synopsis of this, and then we'll have Attorney Godleski after him, and then we'll take questions from the council.
Thank you, Mayor. As I mentioned in the last council meeting, and as the mayor reminded us, the provisions that we have in our current ordinance are really set up well to handle this. I had provided the council with some modifications to the ordinance that would help expedite. The primary one being the approval, again, for these temporary outdoor service areas to go from a committee council approval structure to a staff approval. I believe at the staff level, we would be able to approve these within a day or two, assuming we can get the correct and necessary information, as opposed to the committee council structure, which can take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, depending on when people apply. So you can see and given summer started 2 days ago and might be go on by the end of September, I think those days are very important to our businesses. So the primary change that we are proposing, let me correct that. The ordinance mirrors the outdoor service area ordinance that we currently have, with few exceptions. One being the approval process that I just outlined. We would look to continue to have the buffer yard requirements, the fencing when we have beer gardens within 150 feet of residential properties. However, we've allowed that to be more than just a fence. If we have an existing fence that's already in place, if we have sufficient landscaping, if we have a building, if we have some other kind of buffer, we would have the flexibility to approve that. We would reduce the outdoor requirement for fencing on private property to allow a much less robust barrier, fence, chain, rope, anything to demarc that seating area would be allowed. I would be a little hesitant. I should back up. I would be cautious that if we are approving a seating area that is in a parking lot and exposed to traffic, that the applicant put in something fairly substantial and visible to avoid any type of accident. Lastly, this ordinance doesn't change anything really for our downtown, for our sidewalk cafes, with the exception of allowing the cafes to be extended to the area in front of each of the abutting businesses on either side, assuming they have a business on either side, provided that abutting owner and or tenant would provide written approval to do so. And as we started here, just as an example, I was looking at Mr. Horan's town council property. I knew it was narrow, but I didn't know it was only 17 feet wide. So that's an extremely narrow property. I think you have the ability, maybe 1 or 2 tables out in front of that. If you were able to seek and secure permission from the abutting owners, Future Neenah on one side, and I believe Lux Fine Jewelry on the other, there could be a fairly significant increase in the amount of area that he could put seating on our sidewalk. So that's, again, the ordinance in a very brief description. I also included in my memo that we would propose to waive any fee requirements for this temporary service area, and that the temporary areas would expire on October 1st of this year. I would be happy to address any questions the council may have.
Attorney Godlewski, have anything you'd like to add before we go to the council?
Just very briefly, the ordinance itself would like the permits, would be automatically repealed as of October 1st. So it is truly a temporary effort to give an opportunity to expand the premises for the needs of the businesses that we're trying to address. But it is not a permanent fixture in terms of the approval process or the expansion of premises to adjoining properties beyond the October 1st date. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions the alderman may have.
All right, Alderman, would someone like to move this ordinance in order for you to be able to discuss it? Alderman Steele moves, seconded by Alderman Coons. Discussion or questions? Alderman Steele.
So I actually would love to see this go further. I've been reading about cities in which they have closed down some streets so that there can be social distancing, but people can move freely. I would actually, I would actually love to see us just close down downtown to cars for a period of a few hours in the evening to allow restaurants to really spread and bars to really spread out into the street. We don't, I realize we usually used to have parking issues, but we don't have parking issues right now. And there's a few more cars downtown from what I've seen, but we don't have a lot of parking issues right now. And frankly, it would be great to have some parking issues because that meant people were coming back. And I think we have a history of really attracting people to events where the downtown is closed. And I think it would attract people. And I think we could, certainly propose that people use alternative methods of transportation like biking in the summer to get downtown. But I think that would really expand the opportunities for restaurants and businesses to move everybody outdoors, which I think is considerably safer. So that's what I wanted to say.
Everybody else getting that feedback?
Yeah.
Yours turned up? I don't know. I don't know what that is. Other questions? Thank you, Alderman Steele. We'll address that in a little bit. Other questions or comments regarding this proposed ordinance change? Alderman Erickson, then Alderman Coons.
Thank you, Mayor. You had mentioned several businesses have contacted you about doing this. Who are the businesses? I'm just trying to get a handle on what types of businesses are interested in expanding and doing this type of thing.
At the time, My Place, Gord's, ICU had contacted me, Donnie. The gentleman that owns Four Seasons had asked about it. He's not so sure that he would take advantage of it, but he's a restaurant that may take advantage of it. And then, of course, talking to some of the other ones who have currently outdoor venues, they would be maybe interested in even expanding theirs, even if it was on a temporary basis.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Coons, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess
Coons.
I'm in agreement with Alderperson Steele, but I don't want to confuse the issue. First of all, what we have in front of us, I think, is a great first step, and it allows us to move quickly. But it is one where I don't see a whole lot of incredible things that municipalities can do that are going to help to keep people safe and keep businesses open, other than the things that are already out there. This is one of them. This is one of the few good ideas I've seen that allow for both of those things to happen. And I think as a municipality, if we want to encourage the restaurants, particularly the restaurants in the community, and help them survive and hopefully flourish, take some steps. And I think this is the most minor step we can take, but I think it's a good first place to start. Yeah, I mean, it'd be the best if we can get people be outside. First of all, people love to eat outside, and it happens to be the safest scenario I can think of for them. So I'm in favor of this, and I'm in favor of much more. Now, there's things we have to work out, but I would really push community development to get really creative and do some things that we can do that truly our businesses and keep people safe.
Thank you very much. I know Director Hayes can answer those questions, but we have made, we've reached out to the bid district and also Nikki from Future Neenah. and ask them about possibly your suggestion, Alderman Steele. Because of the current mix of hospitality business in that downtown district, it's my opinion, I think we have to hear from them as a united front. If the stores are willing to give up their parking after 5 p.m. or whatever in order for the restaurant industry or the bar industry to utilize those spaces. So that's kind of what I heard. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. We have been in conversations, and as the mayor said, we're really waiting to hear the feedback from the bid, since they live and breathe down there. Jerry and I have not talked about closing Wisconsin Avenue, but I can tell you that although we don't have a parking problem, we have lots of traffic, and that could be a challenge. The other thing that we've been made aware of as we talk about closing the parking is a number of the businesses, the restaurants, have been doing a lot of curbside pickup. So that if you remove the parking, that can cause an issue for that part of the business plan. The last conversation I had with Nikki Hessel was, as opposed to a permanent type closure, would be perhaps more like a sidewalk sale event where maybe once a week we would close not necessarily traffic, but the parking on Wisconsin Avenue, and bring everything out to the parking area, from restaurants to shops. They could basically have an outdoor market, if you will. Don't know how the concern of that, as if you would speak with Nikki, you would find that the problem is we come up with ideas for events, and then that immediately turns into a concern with, boy, if this event gets really successful, then are we back into a situation where we don't have sufficient social distancing? So are we encouraging something bad? So trying to find something that would provide that balance is really the challenge. But we are, I guess, in closing, looking at trying to find more to do, particularly in the downtown, that would utilize the parking in a way that would help our downtown businesses.
Other comments or questions? Alderman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 2 points I want to bring up. One of them is the capacity that a restaurant has now. I'm sure it's probably figured out by the fire department and how many people are in there and how many square feet there are. Is there a way to tie this to, if you are applying for this and we grant it to you, you have some sort of commitment to maybe cut your indoor capacity in half or something, so it guarantees that you're not just going to be packed inside and out? And that kind of goes along with, can we put a capacity on what's outside? I see that everybody has to be seated at a table or a bar, which at least is not, rows of people just standing together outside like a festival. So that's my first question, was can we have them as a part of this to say, I pledge not to use up my whole capacity and limit it to half? That would be a question to the city attorney.
Well, I think if I may, speaking.
Just a second, I want to get the city attorney first.
Sorry.
Hang on, Jonathan. Hang on.
Certainly a condition like that could be imposed. How it would work in terms of determining a ratio of number of outdoor tables increase versus the decrease in the indoor would be a matter for discussion with the fire department, since they determine that capacity.
Yeah, we all of them operate under a capacity number that, you're right, is a formula that the fire department uses based on square footage. I think part of the reason for doing this is to help increase the capacity, but not inside. That would be, both inside and outside. I don't think it helps them to have to even knock down their capacity inside even further. I mean, if you look around, if you go around right now, I don't think there's too many of them with capacity issues inside, but it's to get people out from under one roof and get them into the outside area. The concern with how many people are out there, I think, Chris, will be taken up by the rule that's currently in place that they're supposed to be seated at a table or at the bar. That's the current rule. So that will eliminate the, having a large gathering outside standing around.
I guess it was just the fact that, if we can make sure that the capacity for it just doesn't increase and we have more people inside and outside is my only thing. And then my other question is, my district, I don't have the downtown, so that's an issue that I don't have much input on, but the bars that in my district that abut residential on the back and they have parking lots on the side, generally just to open view of the neighbors there. I personally had fought for a lot of fencing there, and I would prefer that instead of just having a single rope or a chain or something delineating it, that something like snow fencing or something be used so that you can't just have somebody crawling under to get to their friends or just leaving that way as well. Because what I'm hoping for is that we make sure that the businesses keep an eye on what's going on inside. Just because they're expanding, keeping people further apart doesn't lessen their requirements of keeping an eye on the responsibility of knowing what's going on with people drinking in your area. So that would be my hope of getting the single rope or the single chain to change to at least something a little more solid. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Alderman Lundgren, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Knowing that we live in Wisconsin and our weather is so unpredictable, how nimble, Director Hayes, could we be if we could forecast come real close to October 1st that we had a freak of nature warm spell and we could actually continue that for maybe a couple weeks until it got really cold? I love this idea, number one, and I really want to encourage it, but I was just hoping that, we don't have a real difficulty in being nimble if we see that for the next month after October 1st that the weather forecast is beautiful, and then we have now forced them to close down and limited their space there.
My response to that would be, we can be as nimble as the council chooses to be. All right, so if we are getting mid-September, and even if we don't, clearly we can't predict the weather, but if we said this thing is going fairly well, and there's a 50-50 chance we may have good weather into October, I think the council certainly has the latitude to extend it another 30 or 45 days or however long they feel. And it would really go to the council, but clearly if we were in under some kind of issue, you could do just like you did tonight, schedule a special meeting and extend the ordinance. That would be my view.
That sounds great. And then also just one more thing about the future Neenah. I love the idea of pairing up with them and having them plan an event instead of, over a really long period of time, and have it be, I guess, maybe reservation only. So then you could actually guarantee that people would be sitting and not congregating, because I don't know how you would do it any other way unless you had specific reservations, RSVPs to an event. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Bates.
One question I had was, when we have the neighboring properties added into, if they're allowed to put it in neighboring properties, what sort of consideration do you have for passage of people walking through there and bikes and things? Because what we're trying to do is make sure people get off their bikes to walk them on the sidewalks. There is one business kind of on the corner over by the bus stop that people are coming out the door. There's tables on one side and the window thing on the other, and it's not really easily traversed at times for people with strollers and things like that. Can we make sure that those people, when you plot this out, that there's a definite walkway that people know to walk down?
Good question, Marge. Just so you know, that particular business this week put up actual lines on the ground showing a 6-foot walk pathway that the tables, chairs, or people cannot be in that area so that people can go through. Is that correct, Brad Schmidt? I think you sent me the picture, didn't you?
Chris did, but yes.
Thanks, Brad.
Somebody sent me the picture.
Just to answer your question, Alderman Bates, the other provisions of the ordinance are still in place. The 6-foot minimum clear for the pathway. I think we have a maximum deviation of 30 degrees. So all those things would continue to apply as if the adjoining business was actually the restaurant.
Is there, I mean, this might be kind of basic, but what they did at this particular place with marking out the area, if it is questionable, I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas with kids and there's like a particular color of carpet. Stay on the carpet and you'll be fine. You know, if you've got seating on both sides, just to let people know that this is where you should be walking. You know, I don't know if there's some sort of reflective tape or something that we just stretch out and just some temporary paint.
It was a conversation that Brad and I had, and the mayor referenced the picture. I dealt with Green's Poorhouse late last week to deal with the challenge of what was going on in front of the business, and that was my pitch to them. I said, show me 6-foot clear in a picture and show me how everything fits and maintains that 6-foot. They put the tape down. I didn't tell them to put the tape down, but they did. Brad and I've talked about, much like our bike lanes, is that something we may want to consider in the future? Maybe certainly not that wide, but maybe an 1 or 2 inch line to try and demarc the pathway, if you will.
Walkway.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Alderman Boyette and then Alderman Erickson.
So, Brad, we talked earlier today, and I want to just make sure that I say it and that it gets put in writing, if it isn't already, about the zero tolerance for the infractions on this.
Yeah, I think just quickly, our conversation, Alderman Boyette had some concerns about instances where people don't follow the rules. They put more tables out than are required. We have issues with the 6-foot separation. And one of the things, you know, whether the ordinance gets amended or we just do it administratively, is to really have a zero tolerance policy when we work with applicants to basically say, this is your one warning. You know, we can't allow for the deviation of what's approved just because of the possible issues that could occur.
If I could add that, Jim, if you can, one of the items that wasn't addressed in my memo that's included within the ordinance is the enforcement section. And Jim, you drafted that language. Maybe you can, because we've had that conversation, you can elaborate on what that gives us the ability to do.
Section 2 of the ordinance provides for summary enforcement of the provisions of it by the Community Development Department or by the director or designee, which would allow for immediate correction of violations, issuance of citations, or revocation of the permit in severe instances. In the case of a revocation, there would have to be some prior notice and opportunity to cure, but it would be no longer than 48 hours.
Jim, where's that again?
Section 2 of the ordinance. It's the first section is a substantive matter of the permit applications and so forth. Section 2 goes into the enforcement, and it's unfortunately I didn't paginate
So
the
last page of the ordinance.
Yep.
Last page.
Does that supersede the 3 times that you're out?
This would apply to permits that were issued under this ordinance.
So this is to the temporary permits.
Right.
Alderman Erickson.
I have a question. If this is successful and the retailers would like to extend their hours and have sales outside, do they need a permit as well?
Not if I, are you referring to non, like one of the retail stores versus the restaurants or taverns?
Yes.
This would not permit that. The way it's written, it would not permit it, right? Because this in essence, at least as it relates to the downtown, for lack of a better term, is an occupancy permit.
Right.
This ordinance doesn't provide for that. Not saying it's a bad idea, but this one doesn't provide for that.
If the botanical, let's just say the botanical boutique or something said, hey, this is going on. We have a lot of people in the downtown area. We want to extend our hours and put some things outside. How do they get a permit for sidewalk sales, or how would they then participate?
Right now, I don't think we have anything in the ordinances that would allow for occupancy of the sidewalk by retailers, except in special events. And we issue a special event permit under the street use sections. As far as extending their hours, we don't regulate the hours of the businesses. The businesses could stay open as long as they feel that's economically feasible. But as far as the occupancy of the sidewalk or the street, that would be something that would have to be added to this ordinance if we wanted to allow that for non-food and drink activities.
For instance, Bill Powell occasionally will put a rack of clothes outside. Is that, like, could they add tables or whatever?
No, and if I believe the way that they're putting the rack is they're actually still on their property because of the way the right of way goes there. They stay behind the line on the sidewalk that demarks the right of way. If I remember correctly, Brad or Chris might have more information about that. But so they're not occupying the sidewalk at that point.
Okay.
Is the right of way right up to their building, or is it extend only so far onto the sidewalk?
Chris or Brad might be better equipped to answer that, but my understanding is that there is a line that is off of the face front of the store that marks the right of way line.
Okay. Well, Tammy, I think you got a good idea. I think what Chris and I'll do is we'll check in with Nikki to see. I think that might be a very easy thing that we could do maybe at our first council meeting if they're interested, to just say that allow more leeway with regards to the utilization for the stores to, put out outside racks and that. I've seen it at Bill Paul and that once in a while. So if you get a crowd, like you said, if you get the people down there at night, they might stroll through the downtown, and that retailer might decide to utilize outdoor sales. So I think it's a good suggestion. Alderman Stevenson, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I did. Just as a follow-up to that, I mean, if our if our motivation is to enhance economic reopening, and if our goal is to ensure that reopening with proper social distancing, I don't know why we wouldn't extend the same discussion to bars, restaurants, and retail. What's the difference? Why wouldn't we allow Bill Paul or any other? I doubt Dr. Ike's going to move a dentist chair outside, but there are other retailers that might be able to enhance their economic opportunity to their own self by social distancing on streets. So why would we not do that? I'm a little bit concerned about our high priority towards bars and restaurants in all of our discussions in the last couple of weeks since the Supreme Court handed this off to us and told us to manage it. I think we should be managing all economic reopening opportunities.
I think Alderman Stevenson makes a good point. I mean, thus far, the retailers, I walked downtown and spoke with some of them, and I plan on finishing up this week on a downtown visit. If the private businesses around town, they can already do that now without a permit. They don't need anything if they're on their own property, I would imagine. If they're a retailer, Kruger's, for instance, they have stuff outside? Are they allowed to do that? For instance, or Fox Point Plaza, can they use their area in front of their stores? They don't need anything from the city, I'm guessing.
That's not city right away.
Is that correct, Chris, you think?
For the most part, it is, Mayor. I think that's a little bit of a gray area. So depending on what kind of site plan approvals we had, we haven't been very aggressive in trying to do anything about that because it's been fairly, it hasn't been abused, in my opinion.
But to Alderman Stevenson's point, this might become the new norm where more people during summer weather are going to take advantage of the outside. Is there, Jim, can you think of any amendment, or Chris, can you think of any amendment that would give you the flexibility within this ordinance before we take it up in a few minutes here, that would allow, or Todd or Tammy too, that would allow some wording to give the flexibility to allow that by the department?
I'd let Jim work on that, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at the language here real quick.
Clearly, we're dealing with an ordinance that's already been in place with minor modifications. So it's a big step. And to do it in a couple minutes might be a little bit of a challenge.
Okay, that's fine. Alderman Lang, you have something?
I think that it would be prudent to stick with what we were addressing tonight. And I really like the idea of expanding to include retail businesses. But I think part of the reason that they don't always have that as their regular mode of business is then they would have to have somebody outside kind of monitoring their stuff as well. It's a little bit different than a restaurant. So I think before we get too off track with what we were focusing on for tonight, we should kind of back up. I like the idea of including retail, but I think we should stick with this ordinance and the changes that we're considering, and I'm in favor of those for tonight.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, I would also point out that this ordinance, like the permanent ordinance that we have currently, is only available for premises that hold a liquor or beer license and serve food. It's in the alcohol licensing sections of the current code, the permanent sidewalk cafe. So this is really not applicable to retail type situations.
All right, well, I think Chris and I'll maybe touch base with Nikki and the bid board, which represents the entire downtown district, and ask them if this is something that they would like us to pursue. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Alderman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Bates, go ahead.
Thanks. For the enforcement, going back to that topic, when we looked at the previous ordinance that you kind of redlined what you didn't want, on page 14, parent 9, it talks about 3 or more noise complaints. Is that something that it's going to be at the judgment of the community development again? Because no one's ever been able to get the police out in time to hear these noise complaints. And, if we're doing everything else based on what community development is, just for this little temporary thing, not for the building that they've already put in, I would be happier with that, just because to try and get the police out 3+ times and then miss it every time because they get quiet after that, it seems unreasonable.
If I could respond to that,
go ahead.
One, I don't know that I have a meter to judge it, but using my own ear and under the enforcement section that's added to this ordinance, if we show up and they've got music that is too loud, I think we can request that it be turned down right then and there.
Well, it's not supposed to have any music, right? Zero music.
You're right. Well, so if they had music as an example, you could say, look, there's no music. If we came back the next day and it was on again, if we wanted to, we could say, you're done.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have to do that 3 strikes and you're out. That's really good.
Okay.
Is anybody required to be out there monitoring it? At some point, we said something about some of the beers had to have a licensed bartender on site or within sight view of things. This is probably not going to be able to happen that way. Is there something to say you do or don't have to evaluate what's going on outside? And especially if you have it on a neighboring property, you might not be able to see it anymore.
That certainly could be added to the ordinance.
I think you're right, Marge. I think you're probably right. The reality is we are giving the owners of these establishments that the most important thing to them is their liquor license. So they're going to have to make sure that they're responsible, that things like minors aren't allowed into these areas, noise complaints, those types of things. They all, I sense that they all understand their liquor license is on the line. So they're going to do everything that they can to police, to monitor their area. But I think that, yeah, that's a given. You're not going to have as much control of it as you would if you had everyone inside. I presume waitresses, bar staff will be going in and out servicing these areas, but it's going to be incumbent upon them to monitor the situation so that, you know, that nothing happens to their license, number one, and number two, that it's a successful new venture.
Mayor, if I could.
But I concur that there's some risk here. Yeah. Go ahead.
I did notice in reference to Alderman Bates's question about the three complaints or not. There is that provision in the temporary ordinance at section 1 subsection Roman numeral 3 capital I. Yes. But that section should be amended to read that the 3 or more complaints filed against an owner of an outdoor premises permit issued under this ordinance and verified. We could strike the word verified by the police department just provide that at least 2 witnesses have witnessed the complaints. Shall constitute a sufficient grounds to revoke the outdoor premises granted in this section, subject to the hearing and requirement under. That should be section 3 of the ordinance instead of section 4-96.
That's a suggestion, correct? But not
well, it really needs to be amended because we'll be enforcing it under this ordinance rather than the permanent ordinance, and the permit that we're issuing here does not run from July 1st to June 30th. It's going to run from whenever it's issued to the sunset of the ordinance, which right now is set at October 1st. We're talking about extending it beyond that, but it's not a permanent one.
So you're going to take. I heard you say, Jim, you're going to take the police out of it. So 2 neighbors who don't like a particular establishment doing this could simply say that they were too loud, and that would be enough. That kind of spirit.
No. I'm suggesting that it be that there at least be several witnesses that attest to it. Again, I think we would need to be using a decibel meter in order to determine that the sound, because that sub H does have standards of decibels away from that, so that you would have an objective read on that. But the sub I does need to be amended, and I apologize for that. I missed that section when I was drafting it quickly on Friday. So it's
all right. Alderman Coons.
I'm a little scared where this is going. The goal here, at least in my mind, was how do we help businesses, not how do we get this ordinance and make it more stringent and more difficult. That's not our goal here today. Basically, we had this ordinance in place for a long time. Beer gardens and everything else, we've had very little problems, and yet and we've been able to create a great amenity for a lot of people. We've got a pandemic here going that has created an economic crisis that we haven't seen in a very long time. That is a true concern, along with a pandemic with huge health concerns. We have to come together for a way that is going to help businesses and keep people safe. And instead of trying to find little ways that worrying about possible problems here and there, Neenah's been very lucky to have some great restaurants in our area that people can go to. It is, if you don't have that, it changes everything. We need to do what we can to keep these places going, keep them and keep them flourishing. I'm not saying we go way out of the way. We're talking minimal changes here. I mean, so minimal they're almost not that helpful, but they're at least a start. We need to do more and more. But at least this is the beginning. And the last thing I want to do is do this and then start adding in a bunch of other things about who can complain about something and how many times. The reason community development doesn't do it is because they're not around at 9 o'clock at night, wandering around the bars trying to figure out where the noises come from. Police do that. That's their job. And it should continue that way. Please, let's keep this simple. I'd love to see additional things, but they're going to come in different ways. And hopefully the whole idea was to move quickly on this and be able to give our restaurants something in place so they can move today.
Thank you for your comments, Alderman Bates, and go ahead.
Well, just to say, I'm not trying to make it more stringent. I'm trying to loosen it up because the police have better things to do. And you are in the same district I am. If you didn't get the complaints about the Eagles Club before Dean moved in, you weren't listening. They were upset that things were going on back there. And so I'm just trying to protect. The downtown is by itself. I understand it. I'm talking about the other little bars, my place and around the Dome. And if we don't look at these things and pick out the things that are correct, we're not doing our job. We can't just say, go ahead, do whatever you want because it's a liquor license. And I'm just saying that if H and I can be condensed down to one, saying if it's discovered by the staff that it's too noisy there, they can pull your temporary one. I'm not taking away their regular license, just the temporary one. And I'm just trying to simplify it in that way, not involving the police because they never have the time to get there.
Mr. Mayor, I have a suggested simple I have a suggested simple amendment.
Go ahead.
Okay. What I would suggest is that the strike the phrase July 1st to June 30th, and then strike the police department and replace that with objective measurement by decibel meter, and then strike 4-96 at the end and insert 3, so it'd be section 3 of the ordinance.
Correcting up what's there.
Right. We do have decibel meter standards in section H, which are already in place.
Keep in mind that we do not allow any amplified music.
Right.
I don't care about the decimal reading. If you have a electric guitar, it's a no-go, right? You have an acoustic guitar, might be okay. Todd is singing, he might be okay.
Well, only in a real pinch.
Anyone else have any comments or suggestions? I am going to go ahead, Kathy.
I was just gonna make that amendment if I could get a second for it.
To correct I will second the corrections that Jim said.
Okay, then I'm second it.
There's a motion by Alderman Bates, seconded by Alderman Boyette to add the additional language that was suggested by City Attorney Godlewski.
And correction for the dates.
And the correction for the date. So that's a amendment to this ordinance. Before we, let's, any comments or questions on that? Everyone understand Alderman Coons, go ahead.
It's a question for Director Hayes. Chris, do you see any issue? There's a lot of, it's 3 or 4 different changes there. I want to ensure that you don't see any impediment from this with the ordinance and with restaurants and bars.
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, there's a motion to amend it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any noes, please state your name. Hearing no noes, that amendment is added to the ordinance. With the council's permission, I'm going to very quickly, before we do the vote, I'm going to give the public one more opportunity to make a very short comments. So if there's anyone on here who would like to make a short comment or clarification from what they've heard, now's your time. I know, Jonathan, you tried to get in earlier. We usually leave that time for the council members, but I'm going to give you a minute or two here just to wrap up if you'd like. Go ahead.
Sure, and I don't speak, for my colleagues downtown or the business community at large, but the situation as I see it, it's a sticky wicket for all of us. I think Mayor Dean could probably agree with me that we're all kind of feeling like we're over a barrel, and no matter what we do to try and open up in a responsible manner, someone's going to end up being offended. And as Chris Hayes stated, my restaurant is 17 feet wide. So am I worried about it getting overcrowded in there? No, I don't think that the public confidence is there for people to fill up my restaurant right now. And I'm seeing that at other places as well. So the more we can get people outside for business right now, I think it's going to start to raise everybody's comfort levels. And again, probably start to generate some revenue for us, because if it doesn't happen soon, as Alderperson Coons alluded to, without those things downtown, it's, everything changes, and no one wants to see that happen, but it's definitely getting critical. Everything that I heard was definitely legitimate, arguments and concerns, and it seems like at the end, we've already, as business owners, sort of been thrust into this situation where, guidance and regulation is a bit haphazard, and, one guy 5 miles away from you might have people shoulder to shoulder, and you're scared to open up and let 5 people in, and there's no consistency there. So that's getting a little confusing and concerning. So I think that the more that we can engage the public, get them downtown, get everybody beginning to feel a little bit more comfortable, it's going to be good, for the entire city. So, and then as I think Chris mentioned that he would like to see a united downtown, say, yes, this sounds positive for all of us. I can, do my part to talk to others, about this and see if we can't get, something a little bit more formal put together. It's all kind of been, everybody's just kind of been trying to rescue themselves at the moment. So hopefully we can move forward with a little bit more cohesion. But all in all, if I can add even 8 seats outside this summer, it's going to make a big difference in, revenues and my, ability to hang on as a business right now. So I think it's a great idea. And I think during the fair months, it's probably the best thing that we can do.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments or questions from any alderman? Seeing none. Marge, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, don't be so excited about it. We didn't address anything about the fencing, and I know it says it's for the non-downtown ones. It says it's a demarcation, and I don't know if Chris Hayes could we put in something similar to, as opposed to a demarcation, which could just be a single piece of yarn or whatever, that it's more of a limitation as opposed to a demarcation, because what we are trying to do is make sure that people don't just wander in and wander out and that would be, well, I'm looking at the red line version where it's under item B, document 1.
The demarcation, and I'm trying to find exactly the language, but I referred to it as a vertical demarcation. So not just a chalk line on the ground, but something that has a vertical component to it. Although I understand your concern with the rope, but there would be some barrier of some type to demark it, again, in a vertical fashion.
You mentioned something about if it's in a parking lot to require something more substantial, so you don't have somebody backing out from a table and they walk into a car that's pulling in or something like that.
Yeah, I think that, again, I viewed that as more of a case-by-case basis. If we see a situation where we feel they're going to need something more or should have something more to avoid that type of issue, then we're going to ask for it. But not all circumstances may have that.
If you see it happening in the future that you'd like to upgrade what they have there, is it possible to require them to have more than you initially required them to have?
If we negotiated in the beginning and said, boy, we think you need something more, but we're willing to try it, then I would put it right in the permit. We're willing to allow it to go this way, but if we determine it needs to be something more substantial, we can ask for it later. That's how I would issue
Jim, is that
permit.
something you can do?
Yes. If you give me a moment, I'll try. What's that?
Yes.
He's running with the yes. Okay, if that's put in the minutes, then I feel comfortable with that. But I just don't want them to say, oh, the rope is fine. We're just going to stick with the rope. And, you know, people are going under it all the time. And
if that becomes a problem, we could come back to the council and amend the ordinance to require additional material to separate the outdoor premises from residential areas.
And they wouldn't be grandfathered in?
Not on a temporary ordinance like this. This is something that's going to go away in 4 or 5 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the comments. Anyone else? Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, because of the temporariness of this, the communication device that your department's going to use with these businesses compared to what we normally would do if they would be going through the application process, is that going to be the same? I mean, are you going to send them a permit? Are you going to send them something different? I want to make sure we provide enough differentiation to confirm that what we're doing is temporary versus someone coming back and say, well, you know, they went on. Why do I have to keep doing this? I don't want to make a big deal about it. I'm going to vote for it. Just want to make sure that when we grant these, that we have enough communication differentiation between a council approved process and a staff approved process, so that we don't have people coming back causing confusion and saying this, whatever. I'm sure we can handle that administratively. I can talk to you later about it, but I just want to make sure that that's in place.
We'll make sure it's in place.
All right. All right. Thank you very much for all the good comments. Alderman Steele, I think you made a good suggestion about, you know, we're going to talk to Nikki more about this and see the possibilities, what possibilities there are, even, you know, maybe on a weekly basis or monthly basis to allow this to happen, or, you know, potentially. So I don't want to put that under the table, but I think it's a good suggestion to talk with the bid about. All right, there's a motion and a second. The motion was amended, so it includes the amendment that was agreed upon. All in favor signify by saying aye for amendment ordinance 2020-07. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Anyone opposed? All right, hearing no opposition, I would deem that motion passes, creating ordinance 2020-07. Thank you all very, very much for that and coming together on a very short notice to get this done for our business community. Is there any other business that can come before us? If there isn't, is there a motion to adjourn?
Wait, Marge
Moved
is,
by Marge. Go
Well,
ahead.
Marge is-
Can we get an update on who applies for these?
Sure,
I
Absolutely.
move to adjourn.
sure.
second.
Chris will do that. He'll put a little list together of who applies for them. Thank you. There's a motion by Alderman Boyette for adjournment. Is there a second?
Thank-
Seconded by Alderman Bates. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Hearing no opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you all very, very much.
Broadcasts of the City of Neenah Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin, Fox Valley. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents via the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues or about these broadcasts by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or by completing the electronic feedback form on the city website, www.neenahgov.org. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.